podcast. I am joined here with Ryan Dusick, former member of a Maroon 5, original member, also drummer, and also a therapist too. Just kind of want to ask a couple things, maybe kind of early on, like, the start of your life and kind of just going from putting on the time capsule and just going way back to how it all began.
Yeah, well, geez, it's like I feel like I've lived 4 lifetimes at this point, and they all have their own space in my memory and time of the band being a very big, specific time in my life. It was like everything that came before that. I was just talking about this. I was like an overachieving kid. I was very academic minded. Baseball was my passion. But being a good boy and getting good grades and stuff was my responsibility.
I'm sure mom and dad are happy about that.
Yeah, it wasn't like they put a lot of pressure on me. It was just kind of my brother and I were high achieving, and that just kind of, I think, became an identity. It was like kind of what I did. But as a teenager, as often happens, you find your first moments of angst when the things that you expected to be meaningful to you all of a sudden are not as meaningful.
Right.
And you start questioning things, and that's natural. I mean, everyone goes through that to some extent, but I think I was rebelling a little bit against the notion that I was going to do everything by the book and just like go to college and become a professional and all that stuff. And it just happened to be, I was also at a school that was kind of a very preppy, elitist, sort of snobby, rich high school, I just didn't feel like I fit in there. I was, even though my family was relatively well off by comparison, these were like the uber wealthy, and I just kind of felt like the kid from the other side of the tracks. And so I think for the first time felt anxiety that I didn't call anxiety, but it was a discomfort with being in my skin. And it just happened to coincide at that time. This was the early 90s with the advent of grunge rock and alternative rock becoming sort of to the mainstream.
Right.
And I just was going through that period of young male adulthood where you have a lot of aggression and angst in you. And so the drums and music, and alternative music in particular, became my passion and my escape and my coping style, and everything all rolled into one.
Is there a particular band that's like been embedded that's what drove you to being into that style of music that was your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my older brother Josh was playing lead guitar in a band, and that was a big inspiration for me to play the drums, because I wanted to be in his band, and I saw the drummer in their band was the weak link. So I figured I could probably, if I could get good at drums, I could probably figure out how to be in that band. And he was really into the classic rock. So it was like blues guitar heroes, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton. So that was my early education in it. But then when sort of the late 80s hair metal era switched over to the early 90s, grunge and Nirvana happened.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
The Chili Peppers was huge for me. I mean, that was, as a drummer, Chad Smith was a big inspiration. Stuart Copeland of The Police, which was a little earlier, but he was one of my favorite drummers just because he was so unique and kind of rebelled against the idea of what rock was supposed to be, just like straight ahead, 4 on the floor.
I'm shocked the Led Zeppelin's drummer, I forget his last name.
John Bonham. Yeah, that was another one. I mean, I definitely combined some weird, disparate influences, but I think what happened was that when I met the guys in the band that became Maroon 5 later, we were all kind of on the same page. I was definitely the most sort of hard rock metal-y of my taste. My favorite, to answer your question, was Soundgarden. That was the band that Chris Cornell was just my ultimate hero, because he just seemed to combine both the vulnerability and insecurity and sadness of the age range that I was going through, the brooding teenage boy, with this intense power and control of his voice and his instrument, and that sort of combination of extreme opposites I got to go actually to the Temple of the Dog reunion tour right before, I mean, it was only a year or two before he died, and that was a full circle moment for me. What was also a really awesome full circle moment was right after he passed away, or a year later after he passed away, Adam called me and he said, dude, we're gonna do the Chris Cornell tribute. Like, we're gonna go to it was at the Forum, and we're gonna play Seasons from the single soundtrack. And I mean, that's something I wouldn't be participating in anyway because there's no drums on it. So I could just totally go as a fan. And Adam and Jesse, who were, when I was 16 years old, we were listening to that music and it was everything to us. And to see them on stage in front of a packed arena playing the music that inspired us when we first started the band. And it was funny because I was sitting pretty far back and there were a lot of, it was, what you would imagine Pearl Jam and Soundgarden fans. It was a lot of middle-aged Gen X dudes.
Right.
Kind of aggro, kind of angsty. And they they said, now I have to sing Seasons, Adam Levine and Jesse Carmichael of Maroon 5. And I saw everyone look around like, no! Because this is not their audience at all.
Right.
And then they started, and they were playing with Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam. And they started off, and everyone was kind of like listening, and then Adam started singing, and I saw them all kind of looking around. I was like, sounds pretty good. By the end of it, they were like standing ovation.
Right.
Adam was not going to mess that up. Like, that's
no,
too big a thing, and he did a spot on Chris Cornell, which is not easy to do, and that song in particular, Seasons.
He's got an incredible voice, like a unique Chris Cornell, and in general, just a unique voice. Adam himself, like, has an insane voice too, like
very different voice.
That's what I was gonna say. Very different voice. So to have the courage to do that, it's huge. So, and I couldn't imagine another singer trying to put the pressure to do that.
Well, we ran into that issue early on in our career because Adam if you listen to his voice, like just this close to him, he has a quiet voice and he has a very mid-rangey voice. He doesn't have a lot of dynamic between highs and lows, and his range isn't huge other than his falsetto.
Right.
Whereas the guys that I was into, like Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell, the guys that inspired me to start a band, had these enormous, massive range and very loud, powerful voices. And Adam was into that stuff too, and so he wanted to sing that stuff, but it was just not his tone at all. So if you listen to the early Cars Flowers stuff, and when we were trying to be a grunge band, he's like doing an impression of Eddie Vedder or Chris Cornell or screaming like Kurt Cobain, and it just sounds painful a lot of the time. It was tough because we wanted to play that music so badly, but then we realized, like, well, you have to embrace what your strength is. And he has such a unique tone and such a very distinctive, unique voice.
Right.
It wasn't until he embraced, like, he had a tonality more like Sting or like Paul Simon or Paul McCartney, like, kind of, he could go up and down in range, but his voice is pretty high where the midpoint is, and his tone is pretty thin. When we learned how to utilize that best, then it really like cut through like a knife and had much more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How did and kind of going back to like way back when, who kind of started everything? Like, who was, was it you that kind of met Adam and became the friendship, or was it Adam coming to you going to Jesse and Mickey? Like, how did all that form together?
So I had been playing, as I said, with my brother's band. Oh, I guess I hadn't said that. I wanted to, and then I joined the band, and that was my dream come true right there. I was playing on stage at the Whiskey and the Roxy and the Troubadour, and I knew Adam. We kind of had not extended family, mutual family friends.
Okay.
We had hung out a few times growing up. He was a couple grades below me, so he just seemed like
because you're the big brother of the group.
Yeah. He was just like an annoying little brother at that age, rambunctious and kind of ADHD kid.
Right.
And, not to knock ADHD.
No.
But so I had just finished up a summer of playing around town, and my older brother and his friends went back to college. It was just like all the guys that I had been playing music with were gone. And so I was looking for new people to play with in the school band. And I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to start my own band and do my own thing. And now as a junior in high school, I was like the wizened veteran of the school pep band, and everyone, the younger guys were looking to me to join their groups. And so right off the bat, Adam, Jesse, and Mickey, they were freshmen at that point, and Jesse started approaching me like in PE class, asking me if I would consider like playing with them and stuff. And I was like, I don't know, these guys haven't played that much. And I know Adam, I knew Adam could play like a little rhythm guitar, but I hadn't heard him sing or anything. I don't remember the exact timeline of this, where this falls in, but at a certain point, right when that school year started, I guess this was before what I just said, I went to go see this other band that Adam was playing rhythm guitar in at the Troubadour. And I walked in, and immediately I was supposed to hate this band because they were like a rival band, and I was going to find everything that was wrong with them, and they were pretty good. They were pretty tight, but Adam was just an afterthought. He was at the side of the stage strumming a guitar, but for the last song of that set, they invited him up to center stage to sing lead vocal. He was 14 years old, acne-faced, shy, but he gets up there and he sings the song Rockin' Robin, which is a good song for his voice. And it wasn't that he was highly polished or anything, but it was just like everyone was taken aback because his voice is so unique. And it stood out. And you're like, you don't hear that every day. You hear people sing and it's like, oh, they're pretty good. But you don't go, I've never heard anything like that before.
Right.
So I just like immediately was like, okay, if I start a band, that maybe should be the lead vocalist, because that's the hardest thing to find.
No, of course.
Lead vocals. You can find a lot of guitar players, or get a guitar player to play bass, or something like that. But so I wanted to start a band with Adam, but I didn't know Jesse and Mickey that well. Jesse was kind of I don't know, he struck me as kind of an overly enthusiastic kid, which was like opposite of me. I was brooding teenage boy, and he was like, yeah. So I just, the jury was out for that lineup. I was trying to pull Adam away and start my own band, but then one day in the school orchestra room, we got together and we were rehearsing for a pep band show, and the four of us, the original lineup, played the Rage Against the Machine song Killing in the Name.
Great song.
And I just kind of like looked around and I realized, okay, these guys don't have as much experience as the older guys that I was used to playing with, but there's just something in the chemistry between the four of us. Just the way that we play together, the push and pull, and
everything gelled.
Yeah, it's just like, I think we were just on the same page in terms of what we were trying to do. And then we did the show, and it was very rebellious. I mean, this college prep school were screaming, "Fuck you! I won't do what you tell me." It was perfect for me. And so I was just like, I think there's something here. And then it was time to start a band, and so that's how it got going.
As far as like first signs of like music interest, what brought you? Because I know you mentioned your brother being in a band, but like, what was it that most kids like me growing up, I thought I could be an athlete, and was there that for you where you're like, music somehow is going to form in my life?
I was an athlete first as well, and sports definitely occupied more of my time and energy as a kid. I was always creative though. I liked creative writing. Music, I would say there was definitely something there early on, but it didn't really take shape until I was about 10 or 12, like that age range.
When you asked Dad for a drum kit and they got it for you finally.
Yeah. Well, I think it was probably destined to happen because on both sides of my family there were musicians. My dad grew up in a house where my grandfather, whom I never met, but he was a Hollywood makeup artist in the 50s and 60s, and he was an amateur songwriter himself. He had a little piano, which I still have in my garage.
Oh, awesome.
In like a 1950s Kimball upright kind of workman's little piano. And he taught my dad and my Aunt Michelle to sing harmonies. When my dad was 4 years old, he was singing 3-part harmonies with his older sister and his dad at this piano. And by the time that my Aunt Michelle was like 13, she was performing at weddings and bar mitzvahs all around LA. And by 16, 17, she was on Broadway.
Wow.
And so she was a performer and a singer and a star, and she went on to be a television and film star. And growing up, there was that element around. It was not my music. I was not a Broadway kid. The theater, it was not my thing. But my dad, he would strum a rhythm guitar, and he would sing songs that he wrote to us at bedtime, that kind of thing. And he was always humming a tune, and it used to annoy me because he was a good enough singer that he could find the harmony with anything. So we'd be listening to the radio, and he never wanted to sing the melody. He was always singing the harmony. And I'm like, that's not how the song goes, Dad. But there was that musical element. And then on my mom's side, I had two uncles who played, one guitar and one drums, kind of old school, jazzier kind of musicians.
So it was just in the DNA, but just didn't come out until the time came, right?
Well, actually, I think my dad thought that music was going to skip a generation, because my brother and we took piano lessons, and it didn't go anywhere. I picked up a violin when I was in 5th grade and tried to join the school orchestra. That didn't go anywhere. We both were in the school musical in 6th grade, and I mean, I listening to it back now was like relatively on pitch. I was in the range of on key, but you wouldn't have thought this guy's got a musical future. So that my parents were kind of like, well, we're not going to push it. We love music, but I don't know if that's going to be the thing. But then, like I said, my brother discovered electric guitar when he was about 14, which would make me about 11. And within 6 months, he was performing on stages around town with his band, and he was like a lead guitarist. In one night, he learned, like a couple weeks into picking up the guitar, he learned the entire solo of "Sweet Child of Mine."
Wow.
And played it, and we were all like stunned. Like, when did he learn how to play lead guitar like Slash?
Right.
And so that was really inspiring to me, and he really turned me on. He was playing Led Zeppelin and Hendrix and all that stuff, and then it was, and then growing up in the 80s, there was a lot of different kinds of influences of music. And my mom is Latin American, so there was some of that influence. And then my dad had, he was listening to like kind of Beatles and 60s, 70s singer-songwriter kind of stuff, James Taylor.
Okay.
And Crosby, Stills and Nash. And then there was, it was the 80s, Hall & Oates and Kenny Loggins. And then, of course, everyone was into Michael Jackson and Prince and David Bowie. So all that groundwork was laid. It was all there underneath the surface, but it wasn't until I discovered my passion of the harder stuff that I connected with music in a more tangible way.
Okay. One of my questions was, when you guys did form Cars Flowers, like, was there, when you guys made songs, did you put in a lot of input when you guys wrote a lot of the songs, or like who was like kind of the captain of the ship when it came to like putting together the songs?
I was definitely the captain of the ship in the earliest manifestation of the band. Some of that might have just been that I was the oldest and I had the most experience, and so I was kind of like taking the lead. They were just kind of stumbling around in the dark trying to figure out how to be in a band and put songs together and perform. Some of it also was just that I'm a control freak and probably my ego, to a certain extent. I was like, well, now it's my turn to shine. This is my band and I'm going to do this thing. So that was really just for the first year or so, I think, of the band. I wasn't a trained musician. I hadn't even taken drum lessons, much less composition or theory or anything like that. But I had a bass guitar too, and I'd been around my brother and his guitars and stuff, and I could play enough that I started just writing riffs. My first idea for the band, because Adam's voice was not like Eddie Vedder's, was that we would be like Tool. Because if you remember Tool, they had really heavy. It was just a triad, just the guitar, bass, and drums, and then Maynard's voice is like this high, kind of pretty sounding voice, singing interesting melodies on top of that. So that was kind of the way I thought it was going to go. So I was just writing these sludgy, heavy riffs, and then trying to write melodies on top of that. But then very quickly, Adam all of a sudden started writing these melodies that I was like, ooh, I can't do that. He has a natural knack for melody. So it wasn't too long before he started writing the melody and lyrics. And then it wasn't too long before Jesse, as a musician, really started to step up in terms of composition and just the harmonic element of what's playing off of the melody and stuff. So within a couple years, they became the songwriting team. But it was always collaborative in terms of the arrangements, and it was humbling to have to recognize that I wasn't going to be the chief songwriter. And then, of course, when we started getting interest from record labels and management, I had to give up the reins in terms of being in ultimate control of everything. So at every step of the way, it was a lesson in humility, just like, I'm going to have a role, and my role is important. But it's not going to be the main guy or the guy who's in control of our destiny and everything. And it wasn't until years later, when I was on my own and doing my own thing, that I think I realized how difficult that was for me to just sort of eat humble pie and accept that other people were in control for a long time. I settled into it for years, but it was not a comfortable position for me. I'm somebody who likes to be the alpha, I think.
No, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, once I'm set in stone on something, I want my way. So, are there things that when you guys did form Cars Flowers and you guys made albums, obviously you made songs, were there pieces that you guys put together that never has been like released, and you guys are like, oh, maybe we'll get to that one day? Or has that ever been like something that you guys ever?
There's two answers to that question, which are both true. They seem contradictory, but they're both true. One is, yes, there's absolute like
Archive and
yeah,
a vault.
so many songs that we wrote, so many demos that were never released, nobody's heard. And two, no way in hell Adam will ever go back and release or do anything with any of that material, because Adam from day one has never been somebody to go backwards. He's always moving forward. Yeah, I think it's also just he had a natural sort of instinct for, like, if you're going backwards, you like, if that was the thing, if that was going to work, it would have worked.
Right.
Find something that's going to work. Don't try to make something that's not working.
No, it makes sense. And that's why they're, you know, they're 20, 30 years into it, or now, you know, 40 years almost into it, and they're killing it still, you know?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. But when it came to Maroon 5, was one thing that the time and place when you first heard you guys making it big, like, do you remember or can recall the time and place, whether it was the radio or where you were, when you're like, our stuff is on the radio now, like, we made it, this is where we are? Can you recall that moment? Or where it was?
It conjures two different memories, and one we were just talking about at breakfast. In '97, when we had our first album, this is long before Maroon 5, this was in the Cars Flowers days. It was right around the time that the movie That Thing You Do came out.
Okay.
And you know that scene in That Thing You Do when their song is on the radio the first time, and like one of them hears it and he's in his car, and he just stops his car in the middle of the road and gets out and runs into the store, and they're just like jumping up and down, whatever. We had a moment like that when we were on the road. I think we were in Arizona, and our song Soap Disco was on the radio because we were playing that night in Tucson. And you know, we just had that moment where we heard our song on the radio for the first time, and we were just kids, we were still teenagers, and we were just like jumping up and down and hugging each other. It was the biggest thing ever. It didn't come to anything at that point because it was like maybe the only time we heard it on the radio. Oh, actually, that's not true. I remember when MTV was going to debut our video for that song, and I think we were in Portland, Oregon at the time, and we were driving around like at midnight because it was on 120 Minutes or Alternative Nation, and one of those shows in the 90s. And we couldn't find it. We weren't checked into a hotel or anything. We were just driving around in our van. We pulled into some fancy hotel and went into the like lounge and asked them if they could turn on MTV, and everyone was like, "What?" This teenagers at a bar asking for them. And so we were sitting in some swanky hotel lobby in Portland, Oregon, and we saw our video. Matt Pinfield announcing our video on MTV. That was another cool moment. But those, I mean, that's, you know, on a certain scale that felt like making it, but it wasn't fame and success at that point. It was just like a big milestone.
Because you probably felt like there's more, you guys can achieve way more than this. And I mean, to me, like, that's awesome though, because you in your book have said, like, you know, growing up you've watched MTV, but just being able to see yourself like for the things that you've grown up watching, and they're like, one day it's gonna be me, and finally having that's gotta be like just such a euphoric feeling.
It was. And I think that because that album didn't succeed, it made us realize that nothing is promised and nothing is forever, and we had to really figure out how to be more in control of our destiny in terms of really being ready to capitalize on the opportunities that come our way. And so 5 years later, when things did really happen and the Maroon 5 album took off, we were ready at that point to really make it happen and for it to be more sustainable. And there were a few moments. It took a while. I mean, even then, we were on the road for a couple of years, and the album had been out for a year and a half before it really took off. And there are a couple moments from that era that I look at as like, okay, now we're sort of really arriving. And one of them was when we opened for John Mayer. It was our first arena show. And we went on stage and it was like, well, nobody knows us, and it's probably going to be a lukewarm response. And it was kind of half full when we went on stage. And by the end of the set, you know, when you're on stage at an arena, you can't really see the crowd because it's just a big black
mass.
Yeah, you're in
You see the
darkness.
first couple rows, and then it's the abyss back there.
Yeah, and you can't even really hear because unless you have in-ears where they
Mhm.
have a microphone in your feed that's giving you the audience
Mhm.
feedback, all you kind of hear is just like a relatively quiet sound of your onstage monitor, and then a distant echo of sound just sort of booming off the back wall. Um, so I remember we were playing Sunday morning, and probably was the closing number of that set. Um, and as we would do, most songs I would start with a drum beat, and Adam would kind of vamp, and um, Adam was like, "Keep the drum beat going. Like, look, I want to try something." He's like, "Bring the house lights up."
Mhm.
So he brings the house lights up, and we get our first glimpse of a packed arena, like packed to the gills. So much so that I was looking out at the back of the arena, like the very top where the nosebleed seats,
Mhm.
and there's like a couple of people with their hands over their head waving like this, and they looked like ants. It was like they're so far away and they're waving at me, and it was clear in an instant we had them. Like
Mhm.
they were enthralled and loving what we were
That's
doing.
incredible.
And we kind of looked at each other, and we got kind of I almost like dropped my sticks because it was like surreal. It's the thing you dream of, a packed
Mhm.
arena, and they didn't know us before that night, and all of a sudden
Right.
they loved us. And so we kind of felt like something's happening now. I think we're really making an impact. And I remember my dad was at the side of the stage shooting with a camcorder, and as we walked up off the stage,
Mhm.
Adam walked past him and he said, "We're gonna be fucking stars." So that was, and then of course, like, I don't know, a year later we did SNL. That was when you're playing live on television
Mhm.
for 10 million people. That's kind of a good sign
Right.
you've made it.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
was just gonna say you made it.
Mm-hmm.
What's something about your time, whether it be Maroon 5 or Cars Flowers, that felt ordinary, but at the time, but now stands out as like extraordinary in hindsight?
Well, I think in general, a lot of people ask me, do you miss the fame and the success and all the big parties? We got to hang out at Prince's house a couple times, do these things that are definitely not ordinary.
Right.
Going to the Grammys and playing SNL and that sort of thing. And I'm really glad that I got to do those things, and it was really exciting and fun, and I get to look back fondly on the things that I experienced that most people don't experience.
Mm-hmm.
However, to me, the process of getting there, which seemed ordinary because I didn't have anything to compare it to, the development of the band from a garage band to a professional band, finding our sound through trial and error, trying out a lot of different styles, just kind of pushing and pulling against each other and bouncing ideas off each other and growing as people, growing as musicians. I thought that's just like what everyone was doing at my age, anyone in a band at least.
Right.
I didn't realize until retrospect how special the chemistry and the development between us as people and as musicians was. It wasn't ordinary. It's not what every band experiences. You don't see that kind of magic every day. In a lot of ways, you have to be lucky to have the success that we had, but I think we also just found lightning in a bottle because we couldn't have planned it for us to come together in the way that we did. It just happened organically, and the balance of the personalities worked well.
And then you even said it too. I mean, you guys did have moments that it felt like a failure, but then you grew from that moment, thinking what it was a failure to you guys truly wasn't, because it made you and led you to another road and into growing into something bigger and better.
Yeah. So just the whole journey of failing and learning and growing, and then finally getting to a place where we had real success.
Right.
It was only in retrospect that you recognize that whole journey was extraordinary. Yeah.
No, awesome. Do you think drumming helped you process or mask any of we haven't touched a full on it yet, but like the mental health challenges you were facing at the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good question. The drums to me, I think, came into my life right at a time when I needed an outlet for the frustration I was feeling, both in terms of what I described at school and not feeling like I fit in, and just the normal adolescent male youth thing of just having aggression and nowhere to put it.
Yeah.
I was not an angry kid. I was not an aggressive kid. I didn't get in fights. I wasn't violent, but
just all the hormonal changes.
Yeah, you got all those hormones raging, and I was shy kid. I didn't really express myself very well. I was quiet, and I was terrified of girls, even though I was obsessed with them. And why else do you start a band
Right.
other than for that reason? That was one of the fantasies, is that, you know, you're going to be playing drums in front of a crowd and girls are going to,
You know, I'll be all over you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it wasn't really even like a conscious thought of that. Certainly that's something I was interested
Mm.
in achieving, but it was really more just like, I don't know. I mean, a lot of performers are like, I want to get the adulation from the crowd, but it was, for me, it was more, I just want to make a lot of noise
Mm-hmm.
and have people have to reckon with me.
Right.
And when I was on stage, it just felt powerful. You know, when you're,
Right.
especially in a small club like the Whiskey, when you're on stage and it, you know, there's like, I think a 500 person capacity. There's never that many people there, but it was, but you're on
Probably
this,
felt like it though.
yeah. But I mean, when you're on, there's like a big drum riser. They mic up your drums. When you hit the kick drum, it shakes the subwoofers
Mhm.
underneath the stage, and the whole room shakes. And you just feel like you're a god, you know.
Mhm, mhm.
It's like thunder and
Top
lightning
of the world.
at your beckon, you know. And so I think for somebody who was insecure in a lot of ways, and just coming into my own in terms of what my masculinity was and my sexuality and
Mhm.
my insecurities and vulnerabilities and anxieties, it just was one place that I felt powerful. I felt in control. And it was fun.
Mhm, yeah.
So it definitely was an escape, a coping style, and expression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, you touched on it earlier, saying that, you know, you had this like compulsive of wanting to do and achieve everything in your way. When inspirational people, like, you know, we talked about like Chad Smith from Red Hot Chili Peppers, all these different drummers, like, were they ones that you would be like, okay, I could pick up on this, or I could do better, or I just want to be Ryan Dusick?
I think it was a combination of both of those things. I definitely looked at some of those drummers, Dave Abbruzzese from Pearl Jam, Matt Cameron from Soundgarden, Dave Grohl from Nirvana,
Dave Grohl.
Chad Smith from Chili Peppers. A lot of those guys, I imagine myself being like them, but I also at the same time, I think as insecure as a kid as I was, I also had this strange confidence that I look back on. It was probably just ego defensiveness, but I just kind of felt like, but there's something about me that's unique, that's special. I don't need to be like, I never wanted to learn somebody else's song and play it exactly the way they played it. I never understood that, why you'd want to be in a cover band or do a cover song and play it exactly the way the original was done. I was like, I don't want to take the time to learn every fill and everything. I just want to do it the way that I would do it. And because that's going to be even better.
Right. No, of course.
And so there was this innate sort of idiotic confidence that something about just what was natural to me was going to be something that people would want to hear.
No, of course.
And I liked the idea of having my own place. And because Stuart Copeland was really my ultimate hero as a drummer. And the biggest knock on him was that he was too busy. He played too much, and he never could just play straight.
Right.
It was never just rock and roll 4 on the floor straight. He always had to turn it around and do a reggae thing or do a African rhythm or something really complicated and progressive. And that was exciting to me, and it was rebellious. Even though it was technical and kind of geeky in some ways, it was like, I'm not going to do what you think I should do or what everyone else would do. I'm going to do something unique and weird.
Yeah.
And it sometimes felt totally random and like, well, who would think to play that there? You're like, you hit a splash cymbal on the 16th up note and then no downbeat. And I'm like, that's not anything that any other drummer would think to do in a rock song or a pop song. And I would just be like, that's so cool, it's so weird. And so that was the kind of thing that I was like, it was kind of a middle finger. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
You talk about it in your book. You've talked about it in other interviews. Like, you played sports. You've had like a lingering injury from baseball that you like kind of just pushed and powered through it. Never really got addressed through it.
Yeah.
Would you kind of say that kind of caused everything as a start of it to kind of dwindle into what it became?
Yeah, that was definitely a big factor. It's hard to know exactly what was
The root cause.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of elements that played into the way that I broke down on the road over time. And it was even more confusing to me then because I had less perspective on it. And I was just in the middle of it, feeling like my body was giving out on me. And even something bigger than that was going on. Like, I just felt like I was a failure. You know, I felt like I just couldn't hack it, and there was something defective about me.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to pick it apart now, I would say the first element that was a major one was that, yeah, I never learned proper technique. And so, being self-taught, I think I was able to do that because I was relatively well coordinated and athletic, and I could just pick up a stick and sit down and watch, you know, my heroes and emulate it. But I wasn't necessarily doing it the right way, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it in the way that felt right to me.
Right.
And there's pros and cons to that. I think because of that, I developed my own style that was unique. And a lot of times when people study music, they train the spontaneity out of you, or the creativity out of you, because you're doing everything by the book. But then the opposite extreme is like, yeah, I was very creative and I was coming up with ways of doing things that other people wouldn't, because I wasn't burned by that. But I also was limited because of that. So I was limited in terms of precision, in terms of endurance and speed. And then all of a sudden you're playing headlining shows for 90 minutes without a break. And even in particular, our songs, our sets, we kind of patterned it at that point after James Brown, where one song just goes right into the next. And it was usually the drums. Like one song would end without anything. We'd just go right into the drum beat of the next song. So literally no breaks at all.
Right.
Which for some people, if they were well trained in terms of sticking technique,
Right.
that wouldn't be an issue, because you're not putting maximal strain on your joints or on your back or anything
Exactly.
like that.
They could just get right into it. Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it was like I was basically, you know, lifting heavy weights the entire time, having to, because I didn't know exactly how to manipulate the sticks in a efficient way. So that was, if I could go back, I certainly would have learned just enough about technique to alleviate the strain that I was putting on my body, for sure.
Is there a specific performance that you have always said in your head, like, this is my favorite one? Or do you prefer, like, some artists might even like the intimate stuff, like the smaller venues, because they actually can kind of just be more free-willing?
Well, there is sort of an inverse proportion. Like at the smaller rooms, you get the energy, so much more energy. You can feel it in the room, and even just like smell the audience. They're on top of you, and it gets hot, and it's just, that's what rock and roll is supposed to be like, you know. And the bigger it is, the colder it feels, literally and figuratively. You know, there's just not that closeness. You have to almost engineer through the tech, being able to really hear the audience and being able to feel like you're engaged with them. But it's huge and it's massive, and you when you go on stage in front of 20,000 people and they're screaming for you, and it's, I mean, especially teenage girls, it's deafening.
Right.
And that is like, oh my God, it's, you almost have to hold your ears. And I wouldn't trade that experience, because it's like, again, not very many people have had that experience. So that was fun in its own way. It's a trade-off between the pros and cons of each. I would say, though, that my favorites were probably the mid-size, like, small theaters, because it was kind of the best of both worlds. When we got just big enough, in particular, I think when we were opening up for more established acts in small theaters, and you're walking on stage and the sound is great, because it's a room a theater is built for sound. You know, it's the sound on stage is good. The sound in the room is good. There's not a bad seat in the house in terms of visually. You can see every single person's face in the audience, whether they're on the balcony, because they're kind of sticking out over you. It's intimate, but just big enough to feel majestic.
Right. And
still sound really good. And you have clarity of sound, which you don't always have in a small club. And you definitely don't have in a big arena. So those shows stand out to me. Especially, I really liked when we were just turning people on to our music for the first time. When you go on stage, you know, most of these people don't know our music, and they're like, kind of like, who's this? Are they going to be good? And then you notice in the second song, they're kind of grooving to you, and by the fourth song, you've got them, and they're kind of dancing or whatever, they're smiling, and you're like, yeah, we got them. That was the most fun for me. And then, like, when we started to headline and doing like the House of Blues kind of venues and stuff, the sound was always good. I have really fond memories of that. I think what stands out in my mind as being a particularly epically good show was playing our first headlining set at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
Okay.
Which is just like an old school ballroom with chandeliers, and it's a little bigger. I wouldn't say that's a small theater. I'd say that's a pretty big theater. I don't know what the capacity is. It might be like 3,000 or something like that. so it feels like it's got a little bit of that cavernous
Right.
arena rock feeling to it, but it's still intimate enough that
That you can still feel like the crowd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Mhm.
And then, kind of to piggyback off that, your favorite song to perform?
It depends. I mean, it kind of changed over time. The song that stands out to me in a lot of ways, just because it was a big pivotal moment in our band's development, and because I co-wrote it, is the song "Not Coming Home."
Okay.
And that song evolved over time in terms of the composition and the arrangement of it, and how we performed it live. Because when we first wrote it, none of the rest of our songs or our set sounded like that song. Um, it was I was listening to a lot of late '90s, early 2000s hip hop and R&B, some of which the other guys in the band were listening to. It was like Timbaland beats and Neptune's beats.
Timberland was
and,
everywhere.
yeah, and it was like Missy Elliott
Mhm.
and Aaliyah, and Busta Rhymes was a big
Mhm.
influence, and Jay-Z, and then like that stuff was crossing over from hip hop to pop, and you were seeing the Neptunes doing Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake
Yep.
tracks. And I was listening to Destiny's Child, and I remember like pumping Destiny's Child coming into band rehearsal, and the other guys would laugh at me. And I was like, "What are you talking about, man? These are awesome songs and awesome tracks, and the rhythms are insane. Like the drum programming and the vocal rhythms, like this is next level stuff."
Mhm.
And I know it's kind of funny, just in terms of the subject matter, it was the,
Right.
but like, I was serious. I was like, I was kind of half smirking, like I'm gonna pump up my Destiny's
Yeah.
Child one. But I remember coming in one day and Jesse was like kind of laughing. He was like, "Destiny's Child again, huh?" I was like, he was like, "Why don't you play a song with a beat like that?" Or like, we were really into the Aaliyah song "Are You That Somebody," which was a Timbaland track.
Mhm.
We all that was the crossover. We were all definitely on the same page with that. So I kind of did my own impression of that, on the drums, and it was unique, for a live drummer to play a beat like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then Jesse came up with this keyboard part that became the basis for the song "Not Coming Home." And I looked at Adam, I could see his wheels spinning. Within a matter of a couple of minutes, he was sitting down, like scribbling lyrics down. And like in 20 minutes, we basically had written the song "Not Coming Home." And it was a very sparse, funky, Timbaland inspired groove. And we all kind of looked at each other and we felt the energy in the room. We're like, this is very different than anything we've done. And it's cool. We can feel that it's
Mhm.
cool. I don't know if an audience is going to get it, but I know
But
we're
in
into
that
this.
setting, it felt, yeah.
And we're like, we got to go where the energy is. We got to go where the sizzle is, because this feels like something is happening. So then we're like, let's just play it at the next. So we'll do it somewhere in the middle of the set. And we did it. And first we're looking around, like we see the audience. There's like some people kind of like, are they serious? And they're kind of like, people are like looking around at each other, smiling and like making faces. And we're kind of like, I hope this. And then we finally hit that chorus harmony, which is like that Michael Jackson. Answer the door, pick up the phone, you won't find me because I'm not coming home.
Yep.
And it was a 3-part harmony, me and Adam and Jesse. And we hit that and then went right back into the riff. And the place just went crazy. And they're all like smiling still, like kind of like, I think this is a joke, but it's awesome. And then we looked at each other and we're like, this is where we got to move. And within like a couple weeks, we wrote Through With You and Secret. And I think we had already written Sunday Morning at that point. But so from that point on, that was like a highlight of our set. And even when we were headlining, it wasn't the centerpiece because we had hits that, like Harder to Breathe and This Love and stuff like that. But it was still the song that I knew was like defining of that sound for us. And whenever we play it, at that point, it was much more rocked out. We like amped it up and made it much more bombastic. But to the very end, whenever we would play that song, when we hit that chorus and hit that harmony, everyone they get real quiet, and then we hit the harmony, and then they go crazy.
Erupt. That's awesome.
And how often does that happen?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then kind of shifting gears now, going towards, the end tail of everything, there's a point of you're getting close to departing the band, right? But in your eyes, did you know that time was coming soon or no?
I did, but I was in denial. It's like, I think that I had that premonition, and in some ways I feel like it almost was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I had been saying to myself for like a couple years at that point, like, this is all going to end really badly. Like, I'm going to go down hard. but then on the surface, I was acting like there was no problem, you know, just partying like a rock star,
Right.
and pretending like it was all just fun and games.
Trying to cope with it in some way, right?
Yeah. There was that dichotomy between extremes of extreme vulnerability and self-loathing, and then this alter ego that I created that just didn't have a care in the world and was just a egomaniac, and so I don't think anyone else. I'm sure people knew I was struggling. I think the people knew.
Did you go to anybody during that time? Like, was there somebody you kind of like leaned on during that time and like expressed any of this?
No, and looking back, that would have been helpful if I had been able to. I mean, I was in my mid-20s and going through a lot, and yeah, it was. I mean, this is 20 years ago. The public discourse has changed in terms of just talking about your vulnerabilities, especially for men, young men, and it's still an issue today.
Yeah.
There's so many men are grappling with their vulnerabilities and stuff in the changing world, and we could get on a whole other conversation about that. But we were sensitive guys, we were artists, but still, there's just a lot of that macho energy of like, oh yeah, you just toughen it out, and you don't say, oh, I'm really struggling with my anxiety,
Right.
So there was none of that kind of conversation. And I wish there had been. I think it would have helped me, to feel seen. At the very least, it would have helped me cope a little bit better.
Right. Do you think if you had that, would you still be part of the
I don't
band?
know. The tracks might have been laid, and I might have been too far down the road on it already at that point that anything would have really helped. But it certainly would have just helped me process it better. If I was going to leave the band, it might have saved me 10 years of suffering through alcoholism and all the things that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
If I had a better support system in terms of that. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a surprise when it finally happened. But it still was, it was the moment when I could not hold on to my denial anymore. So that kind of came shattering down and had to face the reality. And so
that was when the intervention happened.
Yeah.
When you were going through the addiction part of it and the kind of the recovery part of it, did you have during that portion of your time a mentor that you leaned on at that part?
Yeah, that's really important. And I did have different people at different stages of recovery that were that for me. I think when I was in rehab, there were certain central figures that I don't know if I ran into them on the street now, if they would even recognize me or know that they had any impact on me, but they definitely did. I remember I had a counselor early on that was just really helpful because I was having terrible anxiety at that point. I was having panic attacks on a daily basis and was basically agoraphobic, and just being around people all the time and not having a drink and stuff was just like terrifying. And I had my first session with him, and I was like, I don't think you understand how bad this is for me. Like, I'm losing my mind. I'm so anxious constantly. And he's like, look, man, he's like, look at me. Do I seem like an anxious person too? And I was like, no. And he was like, I was exactly like you, man. I was that way before I started drinking. That's why I started drinking. And I just like had crippling social anxiety, and it just like so much self criticism and everything that goes into just not feeling comfortable in your own skin. And he's like, and I drank for a long time to self-medicate that way, and when I stopped, I was exactly like you. I could not handle anything. He's like, and look at me now, like I'm I'm a counselor, I'm helping people like you. It's like, you're gonna be all right. So that was like really what I needed.
How early on was that in?
Like a week.
Oh, really? Wow. That's actually
counselor.
really cool. Like, nice to know like it happened that soon, because some people don't get it like months in.
Yeah, I was very grateful for that experience at the Betty Ford Center. There was a lot of really help, even just people that were in the program themselves that were just a few weeks ahead of me, and they seemed to have already gained something and were farther along than I could have imagined that you would be in a month of recovery. That's why you need community. That's why you need peer support and sober friends, and you need those people that are in your corner. And it evolved over time. Once I got out of there, I didn't really stay in contact with a lot of the people there. You think you're going to, and we were like, we're going to be friends forever. And it's like everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah,
and
everybody has their own thing.
Yeah, and also like I think people come in and out of your life for a reason, and sometimes they serve a purpose at a moment in your life when you really needed it, and vice versa. And
Right.
it's like friends, you might have friends that you're best friends ever when you were in kindergarten,
Exactly.
and it's like you're
And then
not
you never
close
talk
with
to them
them,
anymore or something.
but
Yeah.
you still think of them so fondly,
Mhm.
and how important how formative that relationship
Right.
was, or whatever. And I like to think of it that way. You could look at it as sad and depressing, that like most relationships don't last forever, or you could look at it as beautiful. It's like, well, that was a very special moment,
Mhm.
and we both probably got a lot out of that.
Yeah.
And then you move on to new horizons. And I had a group when I was at the outpatient clinic that I was at after that. We had a support group that also did a AA weekend group, and there was one guy in there that was just a few years ahead of me, but it seemed like this guy was Obi-Wan Kenobi as far as I was concerned, just like a sober Jedi. Um, and then he had his sponsor in the group who had been around for like 11 years, and forget it, he was like some kind of dark lord of sobriety. It's just like, I was like, I couldn't fathom that anyone could have as much wisdom and serenity as these
Right.
guys seem to have. And then I got just a couple more months and then years of sobriety under my belt, and then I felt like, oh, these are just guys
Mhm.
that have been working a program of recovery, but they were
Yeah.
the people that I needed in that moment. And then I felt like I was in the position that they had been in helping other people. And so that was just a powerful feeling, like that which was given to me, I now can transmit to other
Right.
people. And that was ultimately what gave me a new sense of purpose in my life that I had lost when I left the band.
Has being on the other side of healing given you a new appreciation for the role music plays in mental health?
Yes, I'd be lying if I said that my relationship with music is all positive at this point, because it is the one area of my life that I have lingering and unresolved trauma
Mhm.
from. As much as I've
You've gone full circle with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I have found closure on that chapter of my life, and I'm in a place of gratitude. I absolutely am grateful for everything that I got to experience. Um, in particular, just the camaraderie of the band and the teamwork and the creative process. Like that experience, I'm so grateful for. I'm glad I got to experience this magical
Mhm.
thing that a lot of people don't get to experience. But it also, the way that it ended was traumatic for me. And I don't know, to a certain extent, as we get older, things evolve. And I don't know, some people in my age seem to still enjoy music the way I did when I was a teenager. But for the most part, uh, it shifts where your
Mhm.
priorities are, the things that light you up. And to this day, music doesn't really have the same passion for me as it did then. But I recognize that for other people it does. And I
Right.
remember that it did for me at
Mhm.
one point. And so I do feel the power of music, and I do feel how important it was for me in my life at a certain time. I would like to regain that relationship with music, because I see other people that are so passionate and having the experience that I had when I was a teenager with
Right.
it. And it's such a powerful thing. And in some ways, I feel sad that I don't really have that right now. But I have a lot of other things. And I
Yeah.
think life is long, and you evolve. And sometimes your passions and the things that feel fulfilling evolve.
Do you still have like some urge sometimes every once in a while to pick it up and like
Well, I have a room like this in my house with guitars on the wall and drum sets set up and stuff. And uh, it had the intent when I built it was for it to be a recording studio, and so it's pretty well soundproofed, and I've got a lot of gear in there. But then right after that, my life took a big turn. I went
Mhm.
right as I was breaking ground on building that room. I went into rehab, and then my life shifted, and then I went back to school and became a therapist. And so it went from being a recording studio to then being just sort of my office and man cave, and just a place where I had all my stuff. And it was where I studied to get my master's degree. It
Mhm.
was where I wrote my book, Harder to Breathe. Um, and then after that, after promoting the book for a while and stuff, I started my own podcast,
Yeah.
Harder to Breathe as well. And we shoot it in there, and we do everything. So it's like evolved the purpose of the room, and but the instruments in there are like relics of my life.
Mhm.
And in some ways they're relevant, in other ways they're remnants of another time. But whenever I have downtime, I'll pick up a bass or a guitar, and I'll just
Mhm.
jam out a little bit. sometimes when nobody's looking, I'll turn on the PA system and crank up the guitar amp and just like scream some heavy rock and roll, you know. The drums have been less and less, just because the drums frustrate me. um, I wish that I could feel satisfied and enjoy and feel like I was proficient enough to not be frustrated. And I never will stop trying, I think, but it's a complicated thing. When I sit at the drums, there's a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
But music will always have that place. And what I enjoy most now, I think, is when I'm able to just do like a very casual jam session with people that are, I can feel their joy of music and that it's not complicated.
Right.
And a lot of the times what I'll do is just play bass or rhythm guitar and sometimes sing, because like, nope, that's, again, it's still hardest to find a lead singer, somebody that can stay on tune and remember the lyrics.
Yeah.
And so I at the very least can have like, you know, printouts of lyrics and chords when I have people over to jam. My brother, you know, still plays guitar. One of his kids plays the drums.
Okay.
And I have some friends that are casual musicians, and so you know, I do find joy when I'm doing that, and it's just like, it feels like we're teenagers again, just jamming out.
But you've been very open about your mental health journey. What role did creativity play in your healing process?
Very big role. Thank you for asking that. I think that, you know, recovery has stages, and early on I just needed that support, and I just needed, you know, the feeling that I had hope that something was going to be meaningful and fulfilling in my life again, and service became that. You know, that was the initial most important thing that drove me to volunteer, and that led me to go back to school to become a therapist. And so my new passion was psychology and mental health. But for the longest time, my creative side had been stifled in the midst of my anxiety and all the perfectionism and nothing ever being good enough, and all the things that block you from creative process. But then I was in school for the first time in 20 years, and you have a paper that's due and you have to write it and finish it and turn it in. There's no room for writer's block. You got to start it at some point, you got to finish it at some point. And the first paper that I did, I was like, wow, that really got me out of my block, because I had to put something on the page, and then the process of editing and revising it was fun. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I love writing. And I have an English major from UCLA.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy this, even though I'm writing, you know, relatively dry, you know, sort of case studies.
I was just going to say, like case studies.
A lot of what you have to do to be a therapist is self-reflection. So like half of the papers, especially early on, were just, you know, sort of self-reflective, self-analyzation, because countertransference and the things you bring into the room as a therapist really can affect the way that you approach your clients. And you want to try to be as neutral and objective as you can. If you haven't worked through your own stuff, that's a lot harder to do. So it was very therapeutic.
Kind of gave that like closure a little bit for you.
It was more of that closure. It was more just growing. I felt like it was another stage of my own therapy, to be studying this stuff and doing those papers, because I had to do it from a place of more analytical, scientific approach, but then also it gave me insights into things that maybe I had been burying, and knowing like, this is the way I'm going to be working with a client. I'm like, these are things I haven't even done for myself. And the process of writing it down was cathartic. And so being creative in that way gave me access to a lot of emotions that I hadn't dealt with. And that was ultimately what led to me sitting down to write the book, because I was like, I'm going to enjoy this, and it's going to be helpful for me. It's going to be a process of finally working through all the trauma, achieving ultimate closure, and re-scripting the narrative that had been so tragic and sad and negative for me into one that's going to be empowering.
All right, and bring a positive side out of it.
Yeah. And so in that way, I think writing the book honestly was the most fulfilling creative process I've ever had in my life, and the thing that I'm most proud of. Even though obviously Songs About Jane sold millions of records and we won Grammy Awards and all that stuff, and I will always be proud of that. I was one of 4 and then 5 guys in that band. My contribution was significant, but when I listened to those lyrics, that was Adam's journey.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my journey, just in terms of the content of the expression. And whereas that was up until age 24, 25, it took to get to there. The book that I wrote took 40 years of my life living through great times, terrible times, hardships, overcoming challenges, and I had to live all of that to earn the right to earn the right to write that book.
Right.
I was the only person who could write that book, and it was because I had lived that life. And so it was an expression of a lifetime of personal experience and the wisdom gained through hardship that you only gain if you live it, and now an education that I had as a mental health clinician that if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't be able to tell the story in that way.
Did you think about ever writing a book before or no?
I think from the time I was a little kid, the first time I ever read a novel, I was like, I'm going to write a novel someday, because that's just the kind of cocky idiot I was. I just figured I'd be good at that. I never got around to writing a novel, and actually when I finished my memoir, I immediately had an idea for a novel, and I thought about doing that next, which I haven't done yet, but it's always been a fantasy of mine. I think now it's just because this has given me so much purpose in the mental health space.
Yeah.
It feels like I probably should stay in the nonfiction realm if I write more, but I don't know. We'll see. But yes, I always dreamt of writing a book and doing it and getting it published. And even though it's not even a fraction of the reach that's Maroon 5's music gets, it's equally meaningful to me,
Right.
because it's deeply personal, and there's that added element of service and advocacy that the music reaches people, it touches people, it helps people, but this is more overt. This is like sharing tools and things that can be helpful.
When it came to Maroon 5, because of course you said Songs About Jane was a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
You departed right before they did the next album, which I know you're like credited as like director, I think, for
musical
right?
director.
Musical director. How much input did you have on that album going in before you left?
Yeah, that was tough, man. That was a really rough process, because about half of that record we had already written when I was on the road with the band, and there were a few songs in particular that I was really looking forward to playing and recording in the studio. There were a few songs that we were playing live that didn't end up making the record, but the first single, Makes Me Wonder, that was a song Adam had made a demo for, we were already working on. I think second single, Won't Go Home Without You, was a song we'd been playing since early in the Songs About Jane touring days.
Right.
There were a few others. I don't remember exactly. I don't remember that album that well, but basically, in my mind, when we finished Songs About Jane, we thought to ourselves, oh, well, this was all right. We kind of blew it, but the next one will be better. And we thought and then all of a sudden it started taking off, and we're like, I guess people like it. And we're like, but wait until they hear the next one. It's going to be better. And then also we knew that all the hard work is on your first album, and we toured for 4 years on that record. And I was in my mind, next time we go in the studio, we're going to have a huge budget. We're going to have, it's going to be really cushy. We're going to take our time and make it amazing. And then we're going to go out and we're going to be in 5-star hotels and private jets. And I was like, that's what I was looking forward to. And then it wasn't going to be for me to do that. And so at first, the band was like, well, we need you there. We need you to be a part of it. Like, you're part of the chemistry of this band. And I wanted to believe that, even though I had been sort of pushed out and not really a part of it anymore. But I really made an effort to swallow my pride. I was like, this is bigger than me. And if this is the last part of my legacy for Maroon 5, I'm going to take this very seriously. I want it to be as good as it can, even if I'm not the person behind the drums, whatever role I can play. And so in my negotiations and leaving the band, we discussed what will be my title on that record, and what exactly will be my responsibility. And I wanted to produce the record. That was my first request. And they're like, no, we're not going to give you the reins of the whole thing. We need somebody with more experience than that. But we want you to be involved in the production. So originally they pitched the idea of it being additional production by Ryan Dusick, and I was like, that just sounds like somebody who came in and like tuned a guitar. Like, I was like, I need something that sounds a little more important than that. So it was my choice to be musical director. I don't know what musical director even means, really. I know now more,
Right.
but it sounded more important. I remember Adam saying like, you want producer, you don't want musical director. And I was like, I don't want additional producer.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But what was hard was that I had to go in every day in the pre-production and in the basic tracking and just every single day swallow my pride and really try hard to just be a resource, to just offer my insights in terms of what I would, how I would add something to the mix. But it was such an uncomfortable vibe because they were trying to make a record the best they could, and they were kind of like walking on eggshells with me because I was in a bad place. And I like to think it felt like I was really doing my best to keep my ego out of it and not bring like any negativity. But clearly I wasn't succeeding at that because it was just awkward. And so I had a conversation with Jesse that was really upsetting, and he was like, well, maybe you should just come in like at the end of the week and listen to stuff and give us your comments. And I was like, Jesse, you and I both know that is absolutely meaningless.
Right.
You guys, it's going to be so past what we were working on Wednesday by Saturday that no one is going to want to hear my input. You're just humoring me. And he's like, well, it doesn't really work for you to be sitting here and telling us your thoughts and everything we're doing it as we're doing it. So I was just, and that was just like the last straw, and I just disappeared for a while, and that was really hurtful. At this point, looking back, I don't blame him for that, even though he probably could have said it in a little
different
more
way.
But it was like, what are they? They're making a multi-million-dollar project follow up to the biggest album ever.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have the benefit of just thinking about my feelings first and foremost.
Right.
So I mean, I get it. But it doesn't make it any less painful.
No, of course.
And so I did come back later in the process a couple times, but for the most part, I was not around for a lot of it after that.
If you could either write or sit down with your 25-year-old self today, what would you tell him?
I think I would tell my 25-year-old self, let's see, at 25, I would have been right in the middle of touring on Songs About Jane. I don't know if anything I could tell that guy would have made a huge impact. I have to go back a little bit earlier, maybe like 21, 22-year-old Ryan. I would say don't let your pride get in the way of growing. I think that because a lot of things came naturally to me, and because I had a lot of success with things from an early age, that was a big part of my identity. It was like, oh, I'm good at stuff, and I don't have to work that hard to be good at stuff. And so when things were challenging, when things were new or different and unfamiliar to me, I was kind of like, oh, I don't like that. And so, when I would run up against something that there was criticism or there was a suggestion that I wasn't good or I could be better in some way, I would get defensive. Some of that's just the pride of youth, as a
growing up.
Yeah, but some of it is also just ego. And I'd like to think that I've grown in that way, and I know that I have to a certain degree, but it's still an element of my personality. It's like my first response is like, what, you're telling me I'm not as good as I possibly could be at something? And so I would like to have learned that lesson earlier on, to look at every challenge as a learning opportunity, a growing opportunity, and just be open to the process of wherever it takes you and be curious.
So you've lived both the dream and the recovery. What advice would you give to someone chasing success in music today?
It's funny because I have clients as a therapist that are artists, and some actually on the other side too. I have some that are executives and things.
Okay.
And I run up against this thing because looking back, if I had been, and I was a very practical kid, I was very responsible, but I was also just naive and idealistic. And if I had been totally practical in every way, I never would have started a band. I never would have taken it as far as we did. If I understood the odds of us having success. And so now knowing all those things and being the age that I am, I know like you could try a million times and never do what we did, no matter how talented you are. Even if you're supremely talented, it's just so much that has to go right. The planets have to sort of align. And so my a sort of grown up adult voice says like, don't waste your time.
Yeah,
It's like, or at least if you're going to go for your dreams, go in with the expectation it's probably not going to happen, but you want to do it anyway.
Right.
And only do it because you have to do it, because it's in your bones.
And you like it or something. Right.
Yeah. And just be prepared that it's probably not going to ever be something that's lucrative or whatever. But then at the same time, I'm like, if that's the way everyone believed, there'd never be anyone who would ever reach great heights.
Right.
You have to be a dreamer, and you almost have to be a little bit delusional. You have to have that delusional belief that you're great and that you're going to get somewhere. And I hesitate to squash that in someone, because that's what breeds greatness, you know? It's a fine line between supreme self-belief or dreaming of something and being able to go out into the world and create it, manifest it, and just being totally delusional and self-defeating in that regard. I think you have to have a little bit of both. You have to be practical and pragmatic and understand the world as it is, and know, like, because we learned that the hard way. Like, we thought with the first album that it was just a sure thing. Everyone was saying, you're going to be the next Beatles, and just make a record with this producer and this record label, and it's going to come out and you're going to be stars. And we realized, oh, nothing is promised. Like, you got to do whatever you can to be. It's like the good fortune or good luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. If you haven't done the preparation, it doesn't matter how good the opportunity is, you're not going to be able to capitalize it.
Right.
So you got to do the preparation. Eventually, hopefully, the opportunity comes, and when those things intersect, then you're going to have success. So being pragmatic enough to know what can I do to set myself up for success, but also being delusional enough to believe it's going to happen for me. You got to have that to some extent. If you don't, it's not going to. You know?
Of course. How do you become that mentor, or kind of, you know, being the therapist that you are? Like, a lot of people don't really, you know, they're like, oh, I'll just deal with it, or, you know, I'm never going to fix this, or whatever the case is, you know. Do you have a lot of clients that, you know, when they do come to you, they feel like they're never going to be able to, like, achieve that part?
What's interesting to me, I noticed, we talk about this in addiction recovery a lot. In some ways, the people who have struggled the most are given a gift, because they're forced to have to take a look at the things that are not working for them.
Right.
When you end up in rehab, for instance, or in the halls of AA or NA or one of the 12-step groups, you didn't come in there on a winning streak, right? You're like, life has been pretty rough, and you don't have a whole lot of options. And hopefully, it's not so bad that you are facing going to prison, or, you know,
no, of course,
have lost everything. For some people, that's how bad of a bottom it is before they get help. For me, I was fortunate; it wasn't that kind of a bottom. It was more of just a spiritual and health and wellness sort of bottom, psychological bottom,
right?
But I think that because we have been that low and had no other option either than to continue going until we're dead or in prison or in an insane asylum, or get help and admit that our way of doing things is not working. We're forced to have to do the work that is required to get and stay sober, which then is the work that helps us become better people,
right,
and become more healthy in mind and body and spirit. And that gives us tools to continue to grow. If you
would you say that, not mean to cut you off, but would you say that, like, acceptance is the hardest part of that? Or
yeah. That's why it's step one, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like the buy-in sometimes requires you to be so humbled by your addiction or by life that you accept, like, this is not working, and I only have one other option than continuing to get worse, which is to admit that I am powerless,
right, and
that I have to accept help and accept that I have to do the work. It's the only answer.
Can't do it on my own. Yeah.
And so you do it, and then it pays dividends, and you realize it gives you things that you weren't even. It wasn't even in the equation. It wasn't even something you were bargaining for. You were just trying to get clean, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm experiencing joy. I'm actually having better relationships. I'm actually more employable. All these things come because you have to do that work. A A lot of people go through their whole lives, and if they never have to do that work, if they never get so low that they're forced to take stock and find help, then they just accept on some level that they're always just going to be slightly miserable.
Right.
You know, and my relationships are never that fulfilling, and I'm always just kind of battling, or I never really got ahead and achieved the things that I wanted to, and I'm always just going through life with a low self-opinion, and I'm always a little bit anxious or a little bit depressed. And if you don't have that moment where you have to take a moment and reflect on, what am I doing to contribute to this problem? How can I do things differently? What do I need to learn? How do I need to grow? Then sometimes you don't ever do it. So yeah, the buy-in is the hardest part, the acceptance, the surrender. And that is part of the job of a therapist, because obviously if you seek out a therapist, you're recognizing that something is wrong, and that you want to improve something, you want to work on something and change something about the way you're navigating life. However, a lot of people that come into therapy still have walls up or still have defensiveness, and they want to feel better, but they don't want to change things. Because change is hard, you know, and it's uncomfortable, and it's like, oh, you're telling me the world isn't the problem, I'm the problem?
Right.
I came in here for you to agree with me that the world is the problem. And so getting someone to agree, like, yeah, there are things that you can do, but you have to be prepared to do the work and change. That's a hard thing for people to accept.
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow. It is.
And that's why therapy is tough, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's really about whether the person is ready and in the right place, and it's the right person at the right time to give you that message, and you get the buy-in, and then just it resonates with you, and you're able to find the tools that you needed and learn how to apply them. A lot of planets have to align in order for it to work, but it's kind of one of those things, is when you're ready, and you're going to find a way.
Do you still see a lot of relearning, self-taught things that you're like, oh, you know, I never thought of it like this, and I'm the one saying this, you know? Do you have a lot of self-reflection now becoming?
Yeah, that is a great occupational benefit of being a therapist, is, at least if you're a good therapist and somebody who is doing the work yourself, because there are therapists that aren't doing the work on themselves, and hopefully we avoid those. But for me, a lot of times I will find myself giving some feedback or talking with a client about something they're struggling with, and I'm like, ooh, this is hitting home. I'm like, I think I need to take this advice myself, or I need to check back in with myself on this thing that I haven't been checking in on in a while.
The one thing I wanted to mention is, you know, you mentioned your book, Harder to Breathe. You have a podcast, Harder to Breathe. You are on Apple, Spotify.
Yeah.
Yep.
All the above, yeah.
And then and YouTube. I was just gonna say, and YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, Harder to Breathe, the Harder to Breathe podcast. It's like, we talk about a lot of the stuff we talked about today. But we interview guests who are high performing people. A lot of times they're actual performers, artists, you know, singers, musicians, actors, things like that. Sometimes they're, you know, other entrepreneurs, CEOs, coaches, speakers, authors, that kind of thing. But the overriding theme is like how people overcome the things, the obstacles and the challenges in their life, and fight through the anxiety and depression and other mental health challenges, en route to creating and sustaining a meaningful life and career. My co-host, Brian Maylard, I call him Duck. We like to have fun, though. It's entertaining. He's a funny guy. He's a comedic actor. I'm the therapist. He's the lay person. But we also just check in about a lot of everyday things. Yeah. And we're still refining it. You know, everything's a growing and learning process. But
I'm going through it too. So.
Yeah. But I think that it's already something that is really helping people, and is really relatable and entertaining and inspiring. And we're just, I think, figuring out more than anything how to get it to a bigger audience at this point. Right. But yeah, the book, Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all, and finding recovery.
Definitely telling everybody, definitely get a book, read it. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.